Would you like to take this opportunity finally to tell the rioters to stop rioting? Yes or no?
Let me make it clear to the people on both sides of the equation, all of my brothers in Islam and all of the Christians and native people of the UK who feel like they're underrepresented. You have more in common with the people you live amongst than you do with these political elites. The people you live amongst love their children and they're struggling to pay the bills exactly like you are. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth.
The sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit. You told your millions of followers, and it was seen by 15 million people, that it was an illegal migrant who had committed these crimes. Are you prepared to apologise for that lie?
Only in the UK do we have a country so insane that we have no border, we don't know who's there, crimes through the roof, nobody's safe on the streets anymore, and then when you point these things out, somehow you're some kind of racist and bad person.
No, you're posting complete disinformation.
Oh, I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
Sir. Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of
Yeah,
course,
you
I
did.
got the wrong stabber.
Yeah, you did.
Piers, be very careful what you say.
On July 29th, a 17-year-old boy murdered 3 girls and injured 8 more children in a horrific mass stabbing at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Merseyside. The alleged killer was born in Wales to Rwandan parents, but police did not initially confirm his identity because he's aged under 18. Disinformation filled the vacuum instead. Right-wing influencers spread a battery of false claims online, including that the killer was a devout Muslim and a Syrian refugee. Riots and looting have since spread to at least 16 towns and cities across the UK. Far-right thugs have sieged mosques and hotels housing asylum seekers. Groups of armed Muslim men have attacked people in the street. These appalling scenes have become a stain on Britain's global reputation. Elon Musk has commented that civil war is inevitable in the UK. Many US conservatives are amplifying the unrest as apparent evidence of failed multiculturalism. One of the influencers accused of fanning the flames is Andrew Tate, a recently converted Muslim man whose inaccurate claims in the days after the mass stabbing have been viewed tens of millions of times. And he joins me now. Andrew Tate, welcome back to Uncensored.
It's been a while.
It has, and obviously you've, as in fact I'm about to talk to you, Nigel Farage, who is now a member of Parliament in the UK and who's been saying some very inflammatory things in the last week or so about these riots, has blamed you, named you in a radio interview as for the person who spread the disinformation which he then believed. I want to start by playing a clip of a video you posted to Instagram, I think it was, on the 29th of July, that you posted to various social media platforms, in which was your response to what had happened.
So an undocumented migrant decided to go into a Taylor Swift dance class today and stab 6 little girls. That's right, somebody arrived in the UK on a boat. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knows where he's from. The media is, of course, hiding the fact that this is a 17-year-old male. They don't want to highlight how ridiculous it is that we allow military-aged males, combatants, to flood our shores. I don't see any protests in the UK. I don't see anybody complaining. Nobody's outside of the school. Nobody's outside the police station. The soul of the Western man is so broken that when the invaders slaughter your daughters, you do absolutely fucking nothing.
Now that video has been viewed 15.1 million times. X limited the post's visibility because of its rules on hateful conduct. But the bottom line, Andrew, is that almost everything you said in that video was completely untrue. And yet it was apparently seized upon online, spread wide and far, and made people believe what you were saying. So my question for you off the top here is, why did you race to spread such woeful disinformation, given the massive following you have, and encourage people to take action against a caricature and description of who had perpetrated this, which was simply untrue?
Well, firstly, I'll start by saying I didn't know Nigel Farage said those things about me, which is a shame because I'm actually a fan of him. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I also understand in his political sphere, sometimes he has to hang other people out to dry to save himself because he's getting heat also. Secondly, I'll argue with you about the fact that everything I said was untrue. I think the only thing I said that was untrue is that perhaps he was undocumented. It was a 17-year-old male. It was a migrant. He did kill little girls. And advocating for people to stand outside and make it clear that they're unhappy with what happened is not a dangerous ideology. We live in a democracy where we have the right to protest and the right to make it clear when our voices are not heard. I recently protested against the Olympic ceremony outside the French embassy. I'm not sure if you saw it, complaining about how they depicted Jesus Christ, because I was unhappy with what I saw. And I think that when people feel like they have a voice, they're not likely to get violent. And the problem we have now is that people do not have a voice, which is why we're seeing rioting, which is why we're seeing looting, because people do not feel like there's a political solution any longer. And what I was trying to do is encourage people to stand up and make their voice heard in a peaceful way to avoid violence. Because when people feel like they're not heard, violence is always the end result.
Yeah, but you've actually had the complete opposite effect, and you know the massive following that you have and the influence that you can wield. And by spreading, I mean, again, you've repeated the fact this kid who has obviously now been charged with very serious crimes, including killing these 3 girls, was a migrant. He wasn't a migrant. He was born in Wales. His parents were legal immigrants from Rwanda. So he's not a migrant. He's somebody born in Wales, born in the United Kingdom.
Well, first things first, it's unfair for you to say that I've had an opposite effect. What I did was point out the facts of the situation, that a 17-year-old male killed little girls. If I point out the facts of the situation, that the sky is blue, and then people go and decide to riot because I've said those things, does not mean those things are not true. That's the first thing. Secondly, here's where we have the dichotomy of the UK, and I actually think this conversation is going to be one of the most important and potent conversations of modern times, especially as this issue is not going to be solved anytime soon, Piers. The problem we have now in the UK is that we have a certain subsect of the population who believe because he was born in Cardiff, he is a Welsh man. And we have another subsect of the population who believe that even if he was born in Cardiff, he is not Welsh. I'm currently in Romania. I'm an American and British citizen. The woman who I have a child with is Italian. The child was born in Romania. The Romanians do not consider that child Romanian, not by their view of the world. If I had a child in China, they would not consider that kid Chinese. They would look at the face shape of the child and say that's not a Chinese child. If I had a black child in Russia, they would not consider that child Russian. In the West, in the democracies, we do. But we have a problem because you now have you have a dichotomy of ideas, you have 2 different camps, and the camp that believe that this person perhaps isn't even Welsh in the first place are also the camp which are being suppressed and not allowed to speak and are being smeared and labeled as far right for having genuine concerns. And that is why things are getting exasperated and out of control. What we need is conversation, and what we need is dialect. You cannot have a multicultural democracy and ignore the concerns of one particular subsect of that culture, especially when it's the native culture, and expect everything to be fine forever. There's a lot of people who have a point of view. They didn't feel like they had a political solution anymore. And this is what's happening. The reason this dichotomy exists, Piers, please understand, if they are sitting there and they're accepting that this is a Welsh man, but now they're starting to get concerned for the safety of their children, and they don't feel like there's any kind of political solution, well, then they're going to come to the very simple and obvious conclusion that they'd rather not have anyone from anywhere else in their country to avoid these things happening again because they don't feel like there's any other political solution. This is a fail of the politicians. This is a failure of the leaders. It's the job of a leader to inspire all of the people to have trust in him, not just some of the people, not just the people he likes, not just the people on his party or the people he wants. It is his job as a leader to have every single person in the country believe that he cares about the issue and he's doing something actively to fix it. Instead, what Keir did was stand up and do the absolute opposite. Shut down any legitimate concerns, tell people they don't have a voice, tell people nothing's going to change, is going to stay exactly the way it is. And let me tell you something. I want to make this very clear. There's a lot of people in the world who would rather go to jail and have a warm bed and 3 square meals a day than watch their children die. There's a lot of people who would rather go to jail than watch their society collapse in real time around them. There's a lot of people who would really rather go to jail than feel unsafe to walk the street at night ever again. These are people who have lived in the same place for a very long time. They have a vested interest in this geographical location. And without political solutions being offered, I don't know how hubristic you must be to sit and expect anything other than what we've seen. This is a failure of leadership. And that's what's so disappointing about it.
Right. So here's my response to what you've just said. First of all Keir Starmer has said, as far as I can see, is that he is going to bring the full force of the law against people who committed acts of violence. And the violence that was perpetrated...
No, he called them far right.
Yeah, well, there were far-right thugs who were leading this, and they were attacking mosques. They were chanting anti-Muslim chants, and they were doing this because
there
people
was
had put
a
out
black
there.
person
Hang
in the
on,
crowd. Would you say
you've
the
had
crowd
your
was black
say.
people?
I'm going to have my say now. It was put out falsely on social media that the person who did this was a Muslim. Not just a Muslim, but a Muslim who came in on one of the small boats, part of the very contentious, ongoing issue of the small boat. I'm not saying you did. I'm saying this is what was put out on social media in a series of false posts, which then went viral, right? So he was supposedly a Muslim. Not true. Supposedly came in on a small boat. Not true. Supposedly on an MI6 watch list as a potential terrorist. Not true. None of this was true. And so on the back of that, far-right thugs who led this went up and attacked mosques, and they went and attacked hotels with asylum seekers in there waiting to be processed, and they was trying to set fire to them. Those are acts of despicable violence which were being led by far-right thugs. Now, not everybody involved in all these protests is a far-right thug. Some of them will be ordinary members of the public trying to legitimately protest peacefully. I completely accept it. But the ones who were leading it, who were committing the acts of violence and making the threats against the Muslim community, were doing so because they have been completely misled about who had done this. It was not a Muslim. It was not an illegal immigrant. It was not somebody on the MI6 watch list. It was none of those things. Now, you posted on July the 30th, the day after the killing, and I feel particularly incensed, by the way, that the deaths of these 3 young girls have been hijacked in such a reprehensible manner to attack Muslims when a Muslim had nothing to do with it, right? You put this on July the 30th, you posted a picture saying, this is the man from Cardiff. We're looking at this picture now. That murdered the little girl straight off a boat, you said. Really? He wasn't straight off a boat, because this wasn't the person who perpetrated the crimes. You got 4.3 million views for this. And a community notes clarified, this is not the man that killed, attacked the children and adults in Southport. This image is of Kasonga Mabulu, who was arrested in Ireland in 2023 for a random knife attack at Dublin airport. So again, 24 hours later, you're posting more. Okay. You're posting more. You're posting complete disinformation.
I'm sorry,
it's not okay.
Sir.
It's not okay.
No,
it
Piers,
was not the man.
Did I get the wrong stabber? Oh, I apologize.
Yeah, you did.
Piers Morgan, of course. I got the wrong stabber.
Yeah, you did.
And he certainly looked very Welsh to me. Let me make this clear. I'm a Muslim, and I think anybody who attacked a mosque is going to have to deal with God. I'm not worried about the full force of the law. They should worry about God itself. But I also want to make something very clear to all the people at home, and clear to you, that most of the white people are very frustrated, and they're finding an enemy amongst themselves to take it out on. I think that the white people on these streets have a lot more in common with the brown people on these streets than they do with the politicians, because that's the problem we have here. Keir did not just only say they're going to face the full force of the law. He told everybody with a point of view, everybody who's concerned about the safety of their children, that they are extremists. And that is the most aggravating language you can possibly choose when people finally have had enough of not feeling safe on their own streets any longer. We have people who cannot afford to pay their bills watching migrants arrive who are now being held up in hotels at the taxpayers' expense for indefinite periods of time. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Nobody voted for it. Nobody wants it. And everybody's struggling to pay their bills. Energy prices are through the roof. Inflation is through the roof. Now they no longer feel safe on their streets. They don't want to put their daughters outside to play. The police won't protect them. The police won't turn up for most crimes unless it's something you say bad on Facebook. And when they look for a political solution, they're ignored. What kind of powder keg are we building here through incompetent leadership in the UK? This is nothing but a leadership failure. There's not a country in the world where leadership could fail this spectacularly
Andrew,
different result.
All right. But once again, Andrew, you are spouting nonsense in what you've just said. Not all of it, but some of it is nonsense. You say, for example, nobody voted for the UK to support Ukraine. We've literally just voted Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom with a landslide majority, and he made it crystal clear before that election that he would be contributing billions of our pounds to help the people of Ukraine thwart a Russian dictator. Well, you may laugh, but you just literally said the complete opposite. So we did actually vote for a leader and a party that was completely committed to dedicating billions of pounds of taxpayer money to helping people in Ukraine defeat Vladimir Putin. So that, again, is a complete untruth that you've just espoused.
I'm sure the people who are protesting up there in the north of England who can't afford to pay their bills, who are watching migrants live for free in hotels, who don't feel safe at night because the police don't have enough resources to turn up and respond to crime, are very happy that we're sending money to Ukraine. You're completely right. Yeah, the fact he only had 20% of the populist vote has nothing to do with it. And the fact that every single party will send money to Ukraine because we live in a uni-party system which is corrupt to the core in the first place. That's the reason why no matter who you vote for, the migrants keep coming. And no matter who you vote for, the money keeps getting siphoned out of the tax base and sent to Ukraine. That's the truth of it, is that most people are starting to realize and wake up from the matrix and understand there are no political solutions because it's all a scam and it's all a lie. What we need is people to understand at home that we have to think outside the box and vote for somebody who's not part of this two-party, uni-party insanity, which is why I was a fan of Nigel Farage. Even if he sells me down the river, even if he says I'm a bad person, that's his prerogative and that's his decision to make. I still believe he's the best choice as a leader for the UK.
Well, Nigel Farage is not just... Well, hang on. Nigel Farage has literally just chucked you under a monumental bus. He's gone on LBC radio and he said the reason that he himself was promoting complete nonsense about the person who committed these heinous crimes was because of people like you. Andrew Tate, he names you. He says that you were responsible for spinning disinformation which he was dumb enough to believe.
Well, I never said he was a Muslim. I never said he was a Syrian. I never said he was on the MI6 watch list. The only thing I could have got incorrect is that he was an undocumented migrant. And if Nigel Farage has done that, that's his decision. He'll have to live with his conscience. I'm not here to tell him how to think. I'm also man enough to be understanding that not everybody has to like me all of the time for me to agree with some of the things they say. The biggest problem we have in the world today is everybody's so emotional. Everybody's so upset all the time that if somebody says something bad about them, they pretend that person's completely bad. Nobody is completely bad. Nobody is completely evil. Everybody loves their children. Everybody wants to live in peace. A lot of people talk about the idea of war, but let me promise you, Piers, I'm a person who's had a very varied life. When you see people with machetes outside your door threatening you and the police aren't answering the phone anymore, you don't want war. The Muslims want peace. The white natives of the UK, the Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when you have a political class which refuse to listen to absolutely anybody, do whatever they want, grind everyone into poverty irregardless, then you're going to have some sort of uprising. And it's unfortunate that the poor people, and I call them poor, I mean the average person, is turning on the average person as opposed to turning on the rich elites who are just plundering the country. That's the truth of what's happening here.
Well, what is...
You watched
I think
my
what is
video.
really...
We played it.
Yeah,
the only thing I had incorrect was that he was undocumented. That's the only thing you could perhaps say he was incorrect. The London stabbing, Piers. The London bridge attack, he was born in Pakistan. We want to sit here and talk about how a large contingent of the people committing terror attacks in the UK and the most heinous crimes are not natively English people. And when we need to sit here and address this without being called racist, without being called far right, I'm a mixed race Muslim and I'm pointing out this very obvious truth. If we're not going to be able to point out the truth, what do you expect besides anger?
Well, I mean, the sheer brass neck, frankly, Andrew, of you lecturing me about the truth when you've spent the last week spewing complete fake news bullshit is breathtaking. Right, and also, I would say you've also been spewing stuff that is blatantly racist. On the 1st of August, you posted a cartoon saying, typical man from Cardiff. Let's look at that cartoon. This has had 11 million views.
Yeah, it's a taxpayer, it's a migrant arriving on the boat with taxpayers' money, and I think a lot of people are upset about that. I want to make something clear because I'm a Muslim myself.
When you say typical man from Cardiff, when you say typical, hang on. When you say typical man from Cardiff, you are again telling people that in your estimation, the person that committed this came in as an illegal migrant on a boat. That is not true. None of that is true.
Well, what I'm actually doing, Piers, because you may not be aware of this because you're part of the legacy media machine, which is why you defended Israel so heavily.
I'm on YouTube.
You're not allowed to have your own opinion.
I'm on YouTube.
You're not allowed
on legacy media.
You're part of the
My
legacy
show
media
is on
machine,
YouTube.
And you're not allowed to have your own opinion. But let me explain something
Every
to you,
word
Piers.
of this will go up, as you know.
Perfect. I understand exactly how the media machine works. The fact that they kept highlighting that he's from Cardiff and showing pictures of him as a child, as opposed to showing pictures of him as the large, barbaric man he was, which stabbed those little girls, was a deliberate PR spin by the propaganda arm of the British government to try and subvert and subdue the UK populace because they knew everybody would be outraged by what they saw. That's why every picture of him is he's a kid.
Honestly,
they keep saying he's from Cardiff. This was set up on purpose. Now, the point I was making is as follows.
He was literally born in Cardiff. The Matrix didn't pretend he was born in Cardiff. You've been posting cartoons of people coming in illegally, armed on little boats, because you want people to think that the person that did this was that person. But he wasn't.
You cut out there, Piers. I think I understood you. I'm a Muslim myself, so there's no reason why I want any kind of violence against Muslims. That's the first thing that's very clear. And I want to make something else very clear. I'm actually in a quite unique scenario as a Muslim revert, half black, half white. I've had both sides of this dichotomy try and recruit me, perhaps. I can't be taught to hate anybody. There's no Muslim alive who can teach me to hate anybody, and there's no white man alive who can teach me to hate anybody. There's no hate in my heart, there's only love. But when you have love, you have protectiveness. And you have to feel a protectiveness for the things you care about. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. We call people hateful all the time for having a point of view, especially when they get out on the street because they feel like they need to express it. A lot of these people were not hateful. A lot of these people were full of love, and they were full of concern. I
You've
put up that
literally
cartoon,
encouraged
absolutely
people
true.
to feel hateful. You've encouraged
How?
people to feel hateful because you've encouraged people to believe the person that did this crime, this alleged person that did it, because it's going to court, we'll have to let the process do its due process. But the person who's been charged with the crimes of killing these poor girls is not an illegal migrant. But you wanted to demonize illegal migrants by what you've been doing in the last week. You wanted people to believe this was one of the people who come over on a boat illegally into this country, part of the so-called invasion. And here's the interesting thing about your position with regard to your conversion to Islam and becoming a Muslim. Muslims, as you know, have been ranting about you for the last few days and utterly betraying them because you've decided to associate yourself with Tommy Robinson, who is a far-right thug, who has been spewing utter, horrible Islamophobic, anti-Muslim rhetoric all week, and yet you have not distanced yourself from him. So the Muslim community in the UK now view you as part of the enemy too. You know that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I pray for my brothers, and I think the information I've seen and the replies I've seen have not been hateful from the Islamic community. Saying to Tommy Robinson that I will debate him on issues, I don't think is failing to distance myself. I debate you all the time, Piers, and we disagree on basically everything. I'm happy to argue with Tommy because we disagree on so many different points of view, and I think it's very important that we have conversation. The reason these riots are happening in the first place is because everybody's afraid to talk. I'm prepared to sit down with somebody I don't like and don't agree with.
That's complete nonsense.
I'm prepared to talk to Tommy.
That's nonsense. The reason the riots are happening is people like you and Tommy Robinson have been spewing utter disinformation, which has led people to believe that the person that perpetrated these despicable crimes was an illegal Muslim migrant who was on the MI6 terror watch list.
Firstly,
right. I'm saying you and Tommy Robinson,
let's be careful.
between you, okay. I'm saying between you,
but
you
where's
put
the
out
logic
there
failure?
a completely false impression.
There's a logic failure of lumping me in with somebody who I don't agree with and saying, "Oh, you and him said X."
So do you denounce Tommy Robinson?
Tommy Robinson and I disagree on a whole bunch of issues. And I think he's completely incorrect on his view of Islam. We're not playing this game of constant denouncing.
Do you denounce him for inciting the rioting?
I denounce him for everything bad he said about Islam. He's absolutely incorrect, and I cannot be his friend or support him for that reason.
For inciting the rioting by telling people it was a Muslim illegal migrant.
It's not for me. It's not for me to decide who has incited the rioting, and it's not for you to decide.
Well, you can't denounce that.
A court denounce what? I'm not going to sit here and say who's in charge of the riots because nobody knows.
Telling people he was an illegal Muslim.
My view on why the riots happened is because I believe that the native population, the Christian population of the UK, feels like their voice is not heard. I think if their voice was heard and they had correct political
that's not why the riots happened.
Things would not be happening.
That's not why the riots happened. The riots happened. The riots happened because people
because things are written on social media all day, every day.
No, Andrew.
And there's no riots.
No, Andrew.
People finally had enough. After endless attacks where they felt like they did not get a voice anymore politically, when you don't have a political avenue, you're going to choose a violent one. I think Tommy is wrong about Israel, just like you were, because you were supporting the genocide in Gaza, and I stood up against you for that. I think Tommy's wrong on a whole bunch of issues.
I wasn't supporting any genocide in Gaza.
However, he has a voice. Yes, you were. He has a voice, and I'm prepared to sit here and debate with him, and I'm prepared to correct him on the things he's wrong about. And for you to sit and then you support a genocide, and you're going to say I'm a bad person for saying that little girls shouldn't get stabbed by people who don't belong in the UK in the first place. I don't care if you're a Muslim. I don't care if you're a Christian, black or white.
Okay.
Nobody should be turning up into the country without a passport.
I'm going to respond.
Nobody.
I'm going to respond by saying this. I believe that successive Labour and Conservative governments have completely lost control of immigration to our country, both legal and illegal. They all promised tens of thousands net migration. It's never happened. We now had nearly 1 million people come in last year, net 700, 800,000, whatever it is, most of them legally, completely outrageously large number, which is unsustainable for a country as small as the United Kingdom. We've also got a big issue with, although a much smaller issue, I would argue, with the illegal people coming in on these boats and some of them dying in the process, which is an appalling human tragedy perpetrated by evil traffickers, and this has to be dealt with. So on that, I completely agree. My issue with what's happened in the last week is that we have got Elon Musk talking about there now is going to be an inevitable civil war in the United Kingdom. And I've noticed what he hasn't done, I've called him out on this today, in his series of attacks on Keir Starmer, the new British Prime Minister, he has tried to paint a picture that there is one rule of policing the right-wing thugs who've been attacking mosques.
Did he try?
Well, they have, as you know, and another rule for Muslims walking around armed to the teeth looking for white people to attack. I think both are completely reprehensible, and I'm easily able to say that. The problem is Elon Musk has said nothing condemnatory about the initial rioting, which has continued to go on, which has been anti-Muslim and directly targeting mosques and Muslims for something that they had nothing to do with, which was the killing of these children. And I have a massive problem with that. Yeah. And you have boxed yourself, if you don't mind me saying.
So do I, sir.
Well, hang on.
So do I, sir.
Hang on. You have boxed yourself into a position now where your own Muslim community in the UK are enraged with you because they believe you are siding with Tommy Robinson, who is leading a far-right series of attacks on Muslims and mosques and is being blatantly Islamophobic in the process. And you know that. And so what do you say to the Muslim community who believe that's what you're doing?
Well, if there's a small contingent of the Muslim community which believe that, I've yet to see so much vitriol like you're pretending exists. But I want to make it very clear. I want to make it very clear, Piers. I want to make it very clear here. I will answer the question. I am an Islamic revert, and I do not want to talk scripture because there's people more qualified than I, but I'll make it clear. I lead with love in my heart. The Islam I was taught was one of peace and tolerance. There's not a single person alive who can force me to take sides or to hate anybody else. And I don't care what kind of Islamic person you are, to come along and tell me I should hate somebody else because of Islam is not the kind of Islam I prescribe to. I have half of my family which is Christian, half of my family which is Muslim. I'm half black, I'm half white. I do not want either sides of my family to face any kind of violence on the streets. I'm the person who's been calling for peace. You're reading out the odd tweet here and there. Why don't you read out the 30 tweets I tweeted explaining that we need peace on the streets and we need to restore some form of democratic representation to the House of Parliament. You only choose and lie by omission and try and pretend there's a problem where there's not. I love all of my Islamic brothers, and I also love every Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu. I'm a person who has no hate in his heart, and if anybody has a problem with me personally, I'm happy to speak to them about it. But all in all, I've not seen this hate that you're pretending exists. I've actually seen unlimited support.
People?
I've actually seen huge support from the Islamic community. That's what I've seen, because they understand that in Islam we teach each other to live and love with peace. We're not sitting here trying to hurt each other. And actually, one more thing.
Stop talking for a moment.
I will say to the Muslim brothers, I will say this. We need to show the world that we are not the hateful ideology they think we are. We need to show the world that we believe in God and we trust God and that we're going to stand up for our beliefs and we're not going to allow ourselves to be watered down or walked all over. But we also need to understand that there's this terrible perception of us that has been painted by the Western media machine, and I like to live with love. When I tell people I'm a Muslim, I see fear in some people's eyes, and I spend a lot of time trying to talk that fear out of them. There's love in my heart. There's nothing but love in my heart for everybody.
Yeah, you keep saying there's so much love in your heart.
I will pray.
Fine. There's a lot of love in your heart, but not, it appears, when it comes to... Yeah, but your first response to the murders of these children was to issue a video in which you spew complete nonsense about the perpetrator being an illegal migrant to this country. That does not fill people with love. It makes them hate all illegal immigrants to this country, as well you know. On August the 4th, you retweeted the notorious white supremacist Nick Fuentes on the subject of the riots. And you said this, he said this, Fuentes, it's clear that not only are these protests being amplified and directed by Zionist plants on social media, but the mayhem will also catalyst a major crackdown on speech and persecution of political right in the UK. So it's Zionist plants are fueling this, apparently. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think the point he was trying to make, and this is the meta point, which is very important, is that fighting each other is never going to work. When you have people who live on the same street,
that wasn't the point he made.
Fighting each other,
the point he made is that Zionist plants,
Can I finish?
Jewish people,
May I finish,
Jewish
Piers?
people on social media were amplifying the riots. You retweeted it, so presumably you agree with him.
Well, Tommy and you do work for the same people, so that is interesting that you want to try and bring this point up. However, let me make this clear.
You literally
when you have
retweeted
people on
Nick
the same
Fuentes,
street,
who is a disgusting white supremacist who spews anti-Semitic crap morning, noon, and night. You retweeted him. Do you agree with him when he said it's clear these protests are being amplified and directed by Zionist plants on social media? Do you agree with that?
Well, the point I agree with, if you will let me finish my answer. When you have white people and brown people on the same street...
Do you agree with Zionist plants?
I'm trying to finish... I'm trying to answer the question. When you have black people, brown people, white people on the same street who are all upset with the government
Jewish
because
people.
the government has betrayed them, and I think everybody agrees that, and they're fighting against each other, this will only result in more government crackdowns and more power against everybody. Brown people and white people, Muslims and Christians, everybody will suffer from more totalitarianism from the government. Keir Starmer stood up and said, I'm going to be totalitarian and I'm going to use this as an excuse to take away more of your rights and more of your liberties and take away your ability to ever answer any question and have a true point of view, or to ever
Andrew,
assemble and make it clear that you're unhappy about certain things.
My question?
What Nick was right about was the result of all of this senseless violence, which is going to be a government crackdown and everyone's going to lose their rights. He was right about that, and that's why it's so important that all my Muslim brothers understand that violence is not the answer, and all of the Christians also who are upset and worried understand violence is not the answer, and that we have more in common with each other than we do these elites who are selling us out, and those are the people who are deciding that these boats can arrive on the border.
Stop talking for a moment. I'm just going to try one more time.
The average Muslim man on the street doesn't want boats arriving of undocumented migrants either. You can't turn up in the United Arab Emirates without a passport. You can't go to Qatar without a passport. You can't go to Bahrain without a passport. Only in the UK. Only in the UK do we have a country so insane that we have no border. We don't know who's there. Crimes through the roof. Nobody's safe on the streets anymore. And then when you point these things out, somehow you're some kind of racist and bad person. This is not anti-Islamic to say you need a passport to come to the UK.
But that's the problem.
In the United Arab Emirates, you need a passport. They have the strictest immigration in the world.
Fine. Andrew, had you just said that, that's fine. Okay, we would all agree that the small boats is a total disgrace. I did say that, but you don't read it out. It shouldn't be happening. No, you didn't. You told your millions of followers, and it was seen by 15 million people, this video, that it was an illegal migrant who had committed these crimes. That was a lie. Are you prepared to apologize for that lie?
It was a migrant as opposed to an illegal migrant. So I was incorrect.
It wasn't. He was born in Wales.
As opposed to an illegal migrant. Well, this is where we have the false dichotomy. He was somebody born here and
was legally allowed to be in the country. Do you accept that?
This is where we have the dichotomy of views, which I explained to you earlier on. I explained to you why they exist.
Do you accept he was legally permitted to be in the country?
I'm happy to repeat myself if you don't understand. But when you don't give people a political outlet and they're trying to protect their children, they're going to go to extreme measures such as, I don't want anybody who looks like they're from anywhere else around me because I do not feel like the police can protect me anymore. And I feel like I have more in common and more in synergy with the people who think like and act like and look like me. That's what's going to happen. This is not me advocating for anything. This is human nature, sir. This is human nature that you are trying to deny, so you can sit here and virtue signal.
It's you spreading lies.
This is the truth. This is human nature, which is the bottom line truth of things. If the police kept people safe like they do in Dubai, you could have a multicultural society. In Dubai, you have all different cultures, 80% immigration. Everybody praises it as a beautiful place to live because it is safe, because the police keep it safe. When the police fail to protect little girls, you can't walk down London Bridge without getting stabbed. You can't wear a nice watch without getting robbed. You can't walk on your phone without getting stolen.
Why don't you just answer my question?
Houses are broken into.
Why don't you answer my question?
I'm answering it. When the police fail to protect anybody, you're going to see...
Why did you lie?
Yes, they are. They fail on every level.
And are you prepared to apologize? Why did you lie?
I've already answered and said I was incorrect saying he was an illegal migrant. He was a migrant. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody who stabbed 3 little girls. Perhaps that's your business, Piers. That's not mine.
He wasn't a migrant. He was born in Wales.
Solitary for the rest of his life.
He was born in Wales.
This is where the dichotomy comes in. The dichotomy I've explained to you 3 times that you failed to grasp because your mind is
I grasp it.
Your mind is not advanced enough,
You don't think people born in the United Kingdom are British? Do you now accept that when you said on the 29th of July that there was an illegal immigrant who had perpetrated this crime, that you were wrong?
I accept it looks like the facts of the matter say, in fact, it was a migrant instead of an illegal migrant. However, there's a huge number of crimes committed by illegal migrants, and I still think the country's not safe as long as they're allowed to come into the country.
Fine. And is your position that somebody born in the United Kingdom is not British?
Now this, I'm going to have to give you a 30-second answer to, Piers, but this is going to be a very important conversation for decades to come, so please hear me out. The UK and the Western democracies are the only countries in the world where we will accept somebody born in the country, even if they have a different genetic lineage, are from that country. If you are born in China and you are not Chinese by appearance, they will never consider you Chinese.
But what do you think? What do you think?
Let me answer. But it's not about what I think, sir. Because there's a dichotomy inside of the Western democracies, and this is extremely clear. If you do believe that somebody born in the country, irregardless of their genetic lineage, is from that country, the only way you can have a society function in this manner is if all people are fairly politically represented and if there is no two-tier policing. If you're going to allow anybody to turn up to a country, be born, become from that country, get preferential treatment in the political system and the judicial system, you are going to have outrage and you are going to have riots. If we're going to accept, sir, that people who are born inside of the UK at any point are from there, and that is their country, then it's even more important that Keir Starmer represents everybody. He doesn't stand up and spit vitriol, which is going to engulf flames.
But to answer my question,
more important that we do not have two-tier policing like we've been witnessing.
Fine. I completely agree there should be no two-tier policing. Everyone should be exposed to the force of the law in exactly the same equitable manner. But just to be clear, do you personally, Andrew Tate, believe if you're born in the United Kingdom, you're British or not?
Personally, I don't think my personal views have anything to do with it, and I think they'll just distract from the point I made. The point I made is that
literally put your personal views out morning, noon, and night. So why are you dodging the question?
Because I don't think my personal views are that interesting. I think I could say my personal views, yes. I believe if you're born in the UK, that you're from the UK. However,
you do. Okay.
However,
fine. No. You've answered the question. You believe they are British. So after that long speech, you agree with me. If you're born in the United Kingdom, you're British. Now, the other thing I want to get clarity on is this. This tweet from your friend Nick, as you call him, who's actually a white supremacist,
It doesn't matter what I think, Piers. It matters what the people who are rioting are thinking.
Fine, you made that point. I wanted to know what you think.
Because you're trying,
I just asked you what you thought.
Moment. You're trying to deflect.
It's not a gotcha moment. I'm asking you to be
that's
honest.
What I think. You're right.
Okay.
That's what I think. But the people who are rioting think otherwise. And I'm trying to explain to you how they think. So we can give them a representation to prevent the riots happening again. I can understand other points of view where it seems you cannot.
You've answered the question.
Sure.
You've answered the question. Let me now answer this one simply. When you retweeted the white supremacist Nick Fuentes, who you call Nick, on the subject of the riots, and he said it's clear that not only are these protests being amplified and directed by Zionist plants on social media, do you agree with what he said? Is that why you retweeted it?
I agree. I agree with the latter point about how everybody's going to lose their freedoms.
What about the first point I've just read out? Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't have to agree with every single point of a tweet. I can agree with the end result of a tweet. I don't know who's directing.
So you don't agree with him?
I don't know who's directing.
So just to be clear,
well, I don't know who's directing these riots.
On social
I just know the end result.
Amplified the riots.
I don't know who's directing these riots. I know the end result. I know why the riots happened in my own personal view because of underrepresentation. I think Keir Starmer's failed.
Do you think it was Zionist plans?
Our political classes sold us out. And I think that the end result is going to be bad times for everyone in the UK. My Muslim brothers are going to suffer, brown people will suffer, Christian will suffer, black will suffer. It's bad times for everybody. I'm not going to say who's directing what because I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm just telling you exactly why I retweeted that tweet.
Right, so a white supremacist anti-Semite, Nick Fuentes, blames Zionist plants for amplifying and directing these riots. And you retweet him.
Do you know who he's talking about when he says that?
Do you?
Yes.
Who?
He's talking about Tommy Robinson, who's openly Zionist. Do you believe Tommy Robinson incited these things? Because if you do, you agree with Nick Fuentes. You have just been sitting here saying Zionists have been pushing these riots to the beginning of this whole interview, sir. So you just fell into the exact same trap. You agree exactly with what Nick just said. So now you're going to sit here and say, oh, he's a white supremacist to try and get gotcha moments when you fail with your own point of view.
Just to be clear,
Tommy is a Zionist, sir. Tommy is a
Just
Zionist.
to be clear then, so just to be clear, when you retweeted this, you believed Nick Fuentes was talking about Tommy Robinson.
I believed he was talking about Tommy Robinson, but I only agree with the latter part of the tweet, as I said.
Right.
But you agree with the first part of the tweet.
So to be
I
clear
don't know why
then,
you're sitting here trying to use it as a gotcha when you agree with the tweet yourself.
To be clear, then you don't agree when he said the protests are being amplified and directed by Zionist plants on social media. You don't agree with that?
No, I think that people had a legitimate concern.
Thank you. That's all we need.
I think the UK is a powder keg.
I don't need another speech, Andrew. You've answered the question.
You agree with Zionists.
It's fine.
You believe that Zionists have solved
No need for a speech.
You do.
No need for a speech.
You are an anti-Semite,
Let me read to you comments from the influential Muslim commentator who's been on Uncensored, Muhammad Hijab, who said to you this: "My brother, I've always supported you, but you're severely off the mark on the following points. Your acquiescence to far-right figures like Tommy Robinson is haram, as he is an enemy of Islam. Your lack of condemnation of far-right thugs who attacked a mosque and who attack Muslims and Islam more generally. Many far-right hooligans want no peace with us. They consider us to be an impossible subject. Our existence frustrates them. You are one of us. They will never accept you fully until you embrace their beliefs. We worship Allah alone and build our purpose on this. No one can compete with this. I urge you to endorse this message and salvage the situation." Do you endorse his message? Do you now denounce right-wing thugs who committed attacks on Muslims and on mosques in the last week? And do you therefore condemn Tommy Robinson for inciting it?
Oh, okay. So firstly, I absolutely condemn all violence, especially against Muslims and against mosques. I know Muhammad Hijab well, and I respect him, and he is extremely versed on the Quran and Islam. He's more versed than I am. I think that by having open conversation with the people I disagree with, I did not see myself as aligning with them, but perhaps this is a perception I need to address, of course. I think anybody who's been violent on either side is doing the wrong thing and is being disgusting. I want to make something clear. Piers, you do this very common trick of me explaining to you why I believe something is happening and then you saying that that's my point of view. I'm not saying I agree with right-wing people who are rioting and attacking Muslims. I'm telling you why I believe they did it. I believe they did it because they didn't feel like they had political representation. That does not mean I represent them. That does not mean I advocate for them. That does not mean I agree with them.
That's not why they did it.
I just sat here. I just sat here while you told me Nigel Farage sold me out, and I said that's fine.
Yeah.
I still agree with some things he says. I'm a very logical person.
Fine.
I'm not emotional about these things.
Well,
I'm
if you're logical, you'll understand. But
Andrew,
if you're logical, you will understand that is not why they did what they did. It's not why they rioted. They rioted in direct response to a social media-led campaign of disinformation which told them that the person who killed these little girls was an illegal immigrant Muslim who was on an MI6 terror watch list.
This is very important.
None of those things were true.
Piers, this is very important, sir. And I consider you in many ways a friend. This is very important. You advocated, please let me finish this, it's 30 seconds. You advocated for the vaccine and you got people killed. You are now going to be advocating for people to lose their freedom of speech online. And there's not going to be anyone's going to be allowed discourse anymore. Because you're sitting here pretending that somebody making a video being upset about little girls dying is the reason the UK was set on fire and not the failure of politicians across generations, sir. That is a fallacy.
It was
it is a fallacy and it is dangerous.
It is dangerous
for you to even push this, Piers. Because we're going to end up in a world where no one is allowed to talk anymore.
You're wrong.
And it's going to be people like you who advocated for it. And when everyone's sitting at home without a point of view, then the slavery is going to be fully implemented on the populace. And you are a bad person for trying to get people's point of view taken off the internet.
No, fine. There are perfectly legitimate questions, as I've been agreeing with you about in this interview, about the levels of legal and illegal migration to the UK. They are simply unsustainable, and I will be hard on Labour until they work out a solution.
We can't talk about it online.
There are also plenty of issues. You just
said if we talk about it, there'll be a riot.
No, we are talking about it. And you have millions of followers.
You just said we shouldn't be allowed to.
You have a platform.
You just said we should not be allowed to talk about it online because it will cause a riot.
You have a responsibility to be accurate. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I was 95% accurate, which is more accurate than the BBC's ever been about anything. Or you, for extension, most of the time. You've been wrong a whole bunch. Do you condemn Israel? Do you remember that? October 7th, do you condemn?
I do.
Condemn Israel and their genocide? Oh, it's about time. So I was right back then, and it took you 6 months to catch up, and you're going to see in 6 months
you weren't
from
right
now,
back
I'm still
then.
right. If we don't,
You said
I'm right. If
no,
we don't cure,
no.
if we don't cure the disease, which is people feeling underrepresented by the political class, the symptoms, which is violence, are going to continue to prop up all around the country
Fine, but
forever.
what you don't
We
seem
must
to
cure
want
the
to accept,
disease, sir.
Fine. What you don't seem
And what
to
you
want
don't
to
want to accept is that what you are saying is that the
Let me put
politicians
the
are
question
perfect
to you.
and they've done nothing wrong,
No,
and the people
I don't think they're
people have no
perfect.
good point of view, and that
That's
we should
complete
shut everyone
nonsense.
up online and not let anyone talk.
Complete
You
nonsense.
are advocating
Nobody
for
is shut up
slavery for the
online.
population. That's what you're advocating for.
Let me speak. Nobody is shut up online. Elon Musk has made it much easier for everyone to be online and have their say. You do it all day long. You spew a lot of untruths. And I'm simply asking you, when you're wrong and what you say helps influence minds to go and commit riots, as it did, because you and Tommy Robinson, between you and others who were amplifying and spreading this bullshit about who this person was, ended up with rioting against Muslims who had nothing to do with the killing of those girls. And you as a Muslim, of all people, should have been the first to denounce
Of course,
it.
Piers. The logic failed. You're a smart man. But are you trying to say that if you say anything online, you are now responsible for all the consequences of that action? So if Cardi B sings about how she can drug men and lie that they raped her, if a girl then lies about being raped and ruins that man's life, Cardi B is responsible? Is that what you're saying? That is
No, I'm asking you
that's
this.
such a logic fail. It doesn't even
No,
make
I'm not
sense.
saying that.
There's a lot of people who say a lot of things
this.
online. There's a lot
Andrew,
of
let
people
me
who
ask you a
advocate for
question.
insane things online all of the time.
Fine, stop shouting.
I'm not telling them to
I'm
not be
asking
able
you
to talk.
I believe you've accepted in this interview that you spread disinformation about the person who perpetrated these crimes being an illegal immigrant to the UK. Would you like to apologise for spreading that wrong information?
If the whole video was expressing my distaste, dissatisfaction, and disgust at the events that took place, I believe that I was 95% accurate and got a detail wrong. I didn't get anything important wrong. A 17-year-old man stabbed little girls in a Taylor Swift concert. And
people attacked asylum seeker hotels
that shouldn't
because
ever
they
happen,
believed
sir.
it was an
That
illegal
should never
migrant.
happen. That should never happen anywhere. So for you to sit and say, oh, well, us as the legacy media who never get anything wrong ever expect 100% accuracy when all you do is lie. I made it very clear that it is unacceptable that little girls die on the streets, and that people need to make it clear that we are not going to accept this anymore.
You also spread lies about who did it.
You've spread plenty of lies, sir,
and
yourself.
the lies have caused the riots.
For you to sit and say that my video is the only reason there was riots is disingenuous.
I didn't say that.
It's dangerous.
I said
you are
Tommy Robinson,
you're going to be the
others
person
spreading
who takes
complete
away
bullshit.
everybody's ability to express. You're going to take away everybody's ability to express their opinion. And let me tell you something. People who don't feel politically represented at least feel like they have freedom of speech online. If you take that away as well, things are going to get a lot worse. It's going to be worse for the country. Piers, you have to be careful sitting here on your show telling people that unless they said what you want them to say, they're not allowed to be on the internet. You are talking Stalinist.
When did I say that?
It's communist. It's dangerous.
When did I say that?
And that's exactly what you said.
When did I say that?
You said that anyone who says anything online is causing the riots themselves directly, and they're directly responsible. And there's no powder keg in the UK due to a failure of the policing and the judiciary and the politicians. And you're sitting here, and I'm telling you, Piers, the things you're advocating for are going to cause more death and destruction than that vaccine you pushed or that country you supported as they bomb little children. Piers, be very careful what you say.
Yeah, listen, I'll take your lectures morning, noon, and night. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. But would you like to take this opportunity finally to tell the rioters to stop rioting? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Well, considering I've been saying that for the last 4 days on Twitter and you didn't read any of the tweets out, they should be in front of you. There's at least 30. Let me make it clear to the people on both sides of the equation, all of my brothers in Islam and all of the Christians and native people of the UK who feel like they're underrepresented. You have more in common with the people you live amongst than you do with these political elites. The people you live amongst love their children and they're struggling to pay the bills exactly like you are. There's no reason for UK, one of the greatest countries in the world, one of the largest empires in history, to be plunged into poverty if it wasn't being looted by a political class that do not care about you. And the people who do not care about you, the number one thing they want is the different breeds or different types or different categories of poor people to fight so nobody looks up and sees who the real enemy is. Britain can be a rich country and it can be prosperous and it can be safe and it can be regulated and the police can respond and it can be as beautiful as a lot as the first world Islamic nations are. There's no reason why it has to be the way it is unless a political class was failing the people who they're supposed to represent for generations. And that's where this anger and hatred comes from. Not because a video was made on Twitter. That is so infantile and asinine to believe that some little video on Twitter started all of these things.
Here's what I
is what's happening. So stop rioting amongst each other and realize who the real enemy of your freedom is. When you understand the truth about this world, listen, I was born on a Luton council estate and now I have hundreds of millions of dollars. And let me promise you, it's never poor versus poor. It's rich versus poor. When a black billionaire and a white billionaire meet, there is no racism because they are billionaires. Racism is what they use to divide the poor people, to stop us realizing that they lie about every single thing on the news, that they inflate the currency constantly, they send our money away to wars we're not interested in, nobody can afford their bills, nobody can afford health care, and you're going to die alone in some nursing home because you can't afford a nice house because even then they're going to inheritance tax it. They don't want you realizing the truth, and that's why. But they want the poor people to fight the poor people.
You know what, Andrew? I agree about the political classes failing people in Britain, as they have in many other countries. I agree with it completely. We need better politicians who have better solutions to big problems facing our country. But you're big on truth, and you abhor lies, and you hold them to account because they lie and don't tell the truth.
Correct.
And yet these riots, you claim were just organic reaction to the problems of the country. No, they weren't. These riots happened because far-right thugs acted on false information that the perpetrator of these wicked crimes against these 3 little girls that were killed and many others that were seriously wounded was an illegal Muslim who come into the country, was on an MI6 terror watch list. That is why these riots happened, and that was all a despicable lie designed to make people have completely the wrong idea. And hang on, and as a result of those lies, mosques, Muslim mosques belonging to your religion that you've converted to, were then attacked.
Answer to God.
As were asylum seeker hotels, because people believed it was an illegal migrant when it wasn't. It was all lies. And you, as the great espouser of truth who hates lying, should be the first to say that anyone that spread any of those false rumors about him being a Muslim, about him being an illegal immigrant, about him being on the MI6 terror watch list, you should condemn unreservedly anyone who spread any of those false rumors, because they're the things that inspired these riots. Bottom line, end.
Yeah, actually, you know, there's a good point here. There's a good point here, Piers. There's actually a very good point you make. And I actually want to speak to all the non-Muslims who are watching this and understand that if you read your history and you understand how the political class have lied to us to get us into all of these forever wars, they've tried very hard to make you believe that Muslims are your enemy. And there's been a large propaganda campaign by the Western media machine to make sure you feel that way. I assure you that 99.9% of Muslims think just like you, feel just like you, and they're good people. And I don't want anyone to instantly assume that Muslims have committed a violent crime because a violent crime has happened. That's
Would you agree
a
with
terrible
what I
thing
just
that
said?
happens, and I believe a lot of that happens. Yeah, I agree that, of course, I'd love to live in a world of absolute truth. Then people like you wouldn't have a job and the BBC would be closed down. And then Hugh Edwards wouldn't be able to sit up there and say that I'm a human trafficker when he gets caught being a pedophile himself. Sir, my hard drives are clean. I've been searched by 4 federal agencies. I'm doing my absolute best. My hard drives are clean. I'm not a criminal. I'm not the reason why the riot started. I'm a person who is very upset, who has 4-year-old daughters himself, disgusted by what he heard, believes that that is unacceptable in any civilized civilization, and we should do anything it takes to prevent it from happening again. Perhaps I was wrong about the fact he was an illegal migrant and he was only a migrant. Perhaps I was wrong about that detail. However, I was right about most of the things I said.
Wrong.
People's concerns are what led them to the streets, not my video on Twitter. And you telling people that they shouldn't be allowed to have an opinion online unless it's 100% factual is extremely dangerous, because they're going to come along, decide what the facts are. They're going to lie like they did with the COVID vaccine. They're going to decide the facts. They're going to shut everyone up who disagrees. There's going to be no dissidents, and we're going to live in the absolute matrix. It's going to be slave minds everywhere who's not allowed to talk. And we're already getting there in the West as it is. So you need to be very careful the ideas you push, sir. Very careful. I think.
Well, you know what? Here's the idea I pushed.
Truthfully.
Here's the idea I pushed. I allow everybody onto Uncensored to have their views uncensored, as you've just done for the last hour. It will go up on YouTube, not the legacy media, but YouTube, uncensored. Every word that we have just exchanged will go up. So you can relax on that score. Andrew Tate, thank you very much.